If you've ever thought Earth's DMV was bad, try dealing with the Galactic Transportation Safety Administration. I've been sitting here for what feels like 3 solar cycles, watching a purple-tentacled bureaucrat stamp documents with 7 different appendages while simultaneously solving a quantum puzzle cube. Show off. Captain Jack Murphy the bureaucrat gurgled through its universal translator, "Your vessel the right to bear arms fails to meet current galactic safety standards in approximately 712 ways." It paused to stamp another document. The most pressing violation being the presence of prohibited Class X primitive weapons systems. I leaned forward in my chair, which helpfully adjusted its ergonomic settings for my human spine. "Listen, Administrator." I squinted at the nameplate floating in holographic text. EHTHHOCHIL pied helpfully. "Yeah. I'm not even going to attempt that." "Look, Phil, can I call you Phil? Those aren't weapons systems. They're historical artifacts. We're a museum ship, specializing in 21st century Earth military technology." The administrator's tentacles twisted in what I assumed was the bureaucratic equivalent of an eye roll. A museum ship. That just happens to have fully functional railguns, coilguns, and, what's this? A tactical nuclear delivery system. "All carefully preserved for educational purposes," I said with my most innocent smile. "We take our role as cultural ambassadors very seriously." "Captain Murphy, the Galactic Council banned all primitive kinetic weapon systems 50 years ago when Earth joined the Federation. Energy weapons only. They're cleaner, more civilized, and most importantly, properly regulated." I gestured at the sleek energy cannon mounted on my ship's hull, visible through the station's panoramic windows. "See? We've got the approved weapons too. The old stuff is just for show. Would I really be stupid enough to rely on outdated human technology?" Phil's tentacles went still, all 14 eyes focusing on me. "According to your species' historical records, humans once used pointy sticks to hunt animals that could easily kill them, then graduated to using exploding tubes of metal to fight each other, and finally split atoms for fun. So yes, I believe you would be exactly that stupid." "That's fair," I admitted, "but also slightly xenophobic. I'm filing a complaint with HR." The complaint form is 47 pages long, requires 3 different species to witness it, and must be submitted in person on our central processing world, which, due to an unfortunate clerical error, currently exists in a quantum superposition between 3 different galaxies. I slumped in my chair. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "I derive precisely regulated amounts of satisfaction from properly enforcing Galactic Ordinance 7249B subsection 12, paragraph 6, regarding the interaction between enforcement officials and potentially non-compliant vessel operators." A warning klaxon suddenly blared through the station. Red emergency lights began pulsing as a computerized voice announced, "Attention all beings. Vexthor warships detected in nearby space. This is not a drill. Please proceed to your designated panic areas in an orderly fashion." Phil's tentacles drooped. "Oh dear. The Vexthor Empire has been quite aggressive lately. They've already conquered 3 systems this month alone. Their energy shields are practically impenetrable." I perked up. "Impenetrable to energy weapons, you mean?" "Well, yes. Nothing else exists that could possibly." No, absolutely not. Don't even think about it, Captain Murphy. Your museum pieces stay powered down and locked up." I stood, straightening my vintage leather jacket. "Of course, Phil. Wouldn't dream of violating regulations. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go make sure our historical artifacts are properly preserved." "I'm not stamping your inspection forms," Phil called after me as I sprinted for the docking bay. "Add it to my collection of violations," I shouted back. "I'm starting a scrapbook. Time to see if humanity's stupid primitiveness could save the day. Again, we're really good at that, much to the galaxy's continued annoyance." The right to bear arms might not have been the prettiest ship in the galaxy, looking more like a floating museum of deadly artifacts than a proper spaceship, but she was home. As I sprinted through the airlock, my engineer Rusty O'Toole was already waiting, his grease-stained coveralls somehow managing to look rumpled even in 0G. So he drawled, not looking up from his ancient paper manual of banned weapons systems, "How'd the inspection go?" "About as well as teaching quantum physics to a goldfish," I replied, dropping into the captain's chair. "Fire up Dave, would you? We've got company coming." Our ship's AI flickered to life, manifesting as a hologram wearing a Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts. Dave, distinctly average virtual entity, was programmed to be aggressively mediocre at everything. It was the only way to get around the AI regulations that required all artificial intelligences to be optimized for peak performance. "Oh boy, are we doing something inadvisable again?" Dave asked with all the enthusiasm of a DMV employee on a Monday morning. "Because I should warn you that my combat algorithms are running at a solid C- today." "Perfect," I grinned. "Wouldn't want to break any regulations about AI combat efficiency." Rusty finally looked up from his manual. "Speaking of breaking regulations, those Vex Thor ships are getting closer. Their energy shields can take anything the Federation can throw at them. Good thing we're not exactly Federation standard." I pulled up the weapons inventory on my screen. "Dave, what's our status on those museum pieces?" Well, Dave scratched his holographic head. "According to regulations, all kinetic weapons must be permanently deactivated. So I went ahead and deactivated them. Temporarily. Permanently seemed like such a strong word." "And the railguns?" "Oh, those aren't weapons at all. They're part of our new magnetic ore processing system. The fact that they can accelerate metal slugs to relativistic speeds is purely coincidental." Rusty snorted. "What about the nukes?" "Industrial mining charges," Dave and I said in unison. "And the point defense system." "Debris deflector," I replied. "Very important for ship safety. The fact that it can track and shoot down incoming missiles is just a happy accident." The ship's sensors pinged as 3 Vex Thor scout ships dropped out of FTL nearby. Their sleek, predatory vessels bristled with energy weapons that could vaporize a small moon. Their shields glowed with that smug purple sheen that just screamed, "We think we're better than you." "Incoming transmission," Dave announced with all the excitement of someone reading terms and conditions. The main screen lit up with the image of a Vex Thor commander, all chrome cybernetics and glowing purple eyes. "Primitive human vessel, power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. Your outdated technology is no match for our superior." I cut the transmission. "You know what I hate most about advanced aliens, Rusty? Their superiority complexes. That, and the fact that they always forget the basics." I grinned. "Bringing our debris deflector online. Like how kinetic energy doesn't care how fancy your energy shields are." "That's what I love about physics," Rusty said, warming up the railguns. "It's got no respect for technological progress." The first Vex Thor ship fired a plasma bolt that could have powered Las Vegas for a year. Their shields were indeed impenetrable to energy weapons, cutting-edge technology developed over centuries of warfare. Unfortunately for them, we weren't exactly up to date on the latest technology. The railgun round, the magnetic ore processing byproduct passed right through their shields like they weren't even there. Their fancy sensors didn't even register it until it punched through their hull at Mach 25. Dave commented as the Vex Thor ship spun out of control, atmosphere venting from a very precisely processed hole. "Would you look at that? Guess someone should have read up on their ancient human history." The other 2 ships began to turn, finally realizing that maybe, just maybe, they'd underestimated the primitive vessel. "Should we show them our other museum pieces?" Rusty asked, already loading another round. I smiled. "Well, we wouldn't want all this historical education to go to waste. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, especially when they involve putting very fast pieces of metal through very expensive alien ships. Let's see them regulate their way out of this one." Word travels fast in space, especially when that word is humans with banned weapons just punched holes through our supposedly impenetrable shields within hours. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session, which I was unfortunately required to attend. Virtually, of course, I wasn't about to leave my ship unattended with trigger-happy Vex Thor patrols around. The council chamber was its usual circus of floating platforms and dramatically robed aliens. My hologram materialized next to Phil from the GTSA, who somehow managed to look even more disapproving than usual. Captain Murphy, the Grand Counselor, began, their bioluminescent tentacles pulsing with barely contained annoyance. "Would you care to explain why your museum ship just violated approximately 37 peace treaties?" "Self-defense," I offered. "They shot first." "That is not the point," a Vex Thor representative screeched, their cybernetic implants glowing in angry purple. "The point is that primitive kinetic weapons are banned." Actually, I held up a finger. "The regulations specifically ban weapons systems. We didn't use any weapons, we used historical artifacts, for educational purposes. The Vex Thor ships just happened to be in our lesson plan about the effectiveness of Newtonian physics." Phil's tentacles twisted into what I'm pretty sure was the bureaucratic equivalent of a facepalm. Captain, you cannot shoot educational materials at enemy vessels. There's no specific regulation against it, Dave chimed in, his hologram appearing beside mine in his signature Hawaiian shirt. I checked. Twice. With minimal effort, of course. Before the council could respond, emergency alerts started blaring throughout the chamber. A massive hologram appeared in the center, showing a Vex Thor battle fleet dropping out of FTL, hundreds of ships, all heading straight for Earth. The Vex Thor representative's smug grin could have powered a small city. The human homeworld's defensive grid consists entirely of regulation-compliant energy weapons. Our shields are now calibrated to reflect any such attack. Surrender now, and we may consider being merciful. Yeah, about that, Rusty's hologram flickered in, still reading his manual. Funny story, turns out Earth's museums have a lot of old military hardware. Like a lot, and technically since they're all museum pieces. You wouldn't dare, the Vex Thor representative hissed. I smiled. Want to bet? Dave, show them the manifest of Earth's combined museum holdings. Dave projected a list that scrolled on for what seemed like eternity. Aircraft carriers converted for space flight, battleships retrofitted with FTL drives, enough tanks to fill a small moon, all carefully preserved for historical value, of course. Did you know humans are really good at keeping old weapons in working condition? It's like a hobby for us. The Grand Counselor's tentacles had gone pale. This is highly irregular. We need to convene a committee to study the regulatory implications. With all due respect, I interrupted, the Vex Thor fleet will reach Earth in about 6 hours. How long do your committees usually take? The Committee for Determining Committee Timeline Durations has not yet completed their 3-year study on efficient meeting schedules, Phil supplied helpfully. Right then I straightened my jacket. In that case, I move that Earth's museums be allowed to conduct a live-fire educational demonstration on the historical significance of human warfare techniques. Seconded, Rusty drawled. For science. All opposed, I asked. The Vex Thor representative was literally steaming, their cybernetics overheating with rage. This is outrageous. You cannot possibly. Actually, Phil interrupted. All 14 eyes focused on a datapad, there is precedent. Subsection 47B of the Cultural Preservation Act specifically allows for practical demonstrations of historical artifacts, provided they serve an educational purpose. And what exactly would this demonstrate, the Grand Counselor asked wearily. I grinned. Why, the historical importance of not picking a fight with humans, of course. It's a very important lesson, one that seems to need regular refreshing. The council erupted into chaos. Meanwhile, all across Earth, museum curators were getting very excited calls about their exhibits. Sometimes the best part about rules is finding creative ways to follow them. As for the Vex Thor fleet, well, they were about to learn why humans kept so many museums around. Let's just say it was going to be a very educational day for everyone involved. The thing about museums is that they're really just libraries of violence that we keep around to remind ourselves what worked in the past. And humans? We're really good at keeping detailed notes about what works when it comes to breaking things. The Vex Thor fleet arrived in Earth orbit with all the subtlety of a peacock at a funeral, their ships arranged in perfect formation, energy shields gleaming. That's the problem with advanced races, they always think pretty equals practical. Commander K-Rax's hologram appeared on every screen in the solar system, his cybernetic monocle gleaming with smug superiority. Humans, your primitive world is surrounded. Your regulations-compliant weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Surrender now and... Wait, why are all your museums launching? I smiled as the right to bear arms took position alongside a restored World War II battleship that someone had bolted fusion engines to. Commander, welcome to today's history lesson. Topic: why humans still keep all this old stuff around. You cannot be serious, K-Rax sputtered. Those are antiques. Oh, very serious, I replied. In fact, we've got educational institutions from all over Earth joining us. The Museum of Military History is bringing their carrier group. The Science Museum has some lovely demonstrations planned about mass drivers. And I hear the Agricultural Museum is very excited to show everyone what happens when you accelerate farming equipment to relativistic speeds. The Agricultural Museum. You'd be amazed what you can do with a repurposed grain thresher and a good FTL drive. Dave, would you like to begin today's lesson? Dave's hologram appeared wearing a tweed jacket with elbow patches. Today's lecture will cover the fundamental principles of Newtonian physics, specifically as they relate to putting holes in things that really deserve them. Please take notes, there will be a test. The first barrage caught the Vex Thor completely off guard. Turns out their fancy sensors were calibrated to detect energy weapons, not chunks of good old-fashioned tungsten moving at appreciable fractions of light speed. Their shields, designed to disperse energy attacks, might as well have been tissue paper. Fascinating, Dave commented as a museum piece railgun punched clean through a Vex Thor cruiser. Note how the kinetic energy transfers through the target. Would anyone like to calculate the force involved? No? Moving on then. K-Rax was practically foaming at his cybernetic implants. This is impossible. We are the most advanced civilization in this sector. That's your problem right there, Rusty drawled, not looking up from his manual. You got so caught up in being advanced that you forgot about being effective. Did you know we've got museums full of submarines that someone mounted anti-grav units to? Real interesting things, submarines. Already designed to handle pressure and structural stress. Works great in space. A wing of Vex Thor fighters dove toward us, only to be met by what appeared to be a restored P-51 Mustang with fusion thrusters. The pilot waved cheerfully as she demonstrated that dogfighting hadn't changed much in the last few centuries. Are those conventional bullets? K-Rax asked in horror. Chemically propelled kinetic projectiles, Dave corrected. Please use the proper educational terminology. And yes, they work just fine in space when you design the casings properly. Physics is funny that way. The battle, if you could call it that, continued for another hour. The Vex Thor tried everything, changing shield frequencies, throwing up debris fields, even trying to jam our targeting systems. But it's hard to jam a weapons system that runs on springs and levers, and you can't really argue with Isaac Newton when he decides something needs to go from point A to point B really, really fast. This is a violation of every modern warfare convention, K-Rax shrieked as his flagship's shields failed to stop what appeared to be a high-velocity tractor. Nope, I replied cheerfully. We checked. Technically, we're just conducting a very thorough historical reenactment. With audience participation. Speaking of which, how would you like to see why we kept all those old nuclear torpedoes in mint condition? The Vex Thor fleet began to retreat, their perfect formation breaking up like a sandcastle in a hurricane. Behind them, they left a trail of ships disabled by everything from carnival game projectiles to repurposed mining equipment. And that, Dave concluded, adjusting his professorial bow tie, is why humans still keep museums. Any questions? No? Class dismissed. The best part? We still hadn't gotten to the really interesting exhibits. Turns out the Museum of Ancient Warfare had just finished restoring a trebuchet. In space, sometimes the old ways really are the best ways. Word of Earth's educational demonstration spread through the galaxy faster than a bureaucrat chasing an overtime approval form. Suddenly, every human colony was discovering a passionate interest in historical preservation. Museums were popping up faster than coffee shops on a college campus. The Galactic Council's regulatory office was having what could charitably be called a complete meltdown. Do you know how many museum permit applications I've processed this week? Phil's hologram asked me, tentacles twitching spasmodically. 10,000. All for historical weapons preservation and demonstration facilities. Someone submitted paperwork to classify their entire space station as a mobile educational exhibit of early human defensive technologies. Did they get approved? Of course they got approved. It was all properly filed in triplicate. The Vex Thor Empire, meanwhile, was discovering that their advanced technology had a slight weakness. It was utterly useless against humans who'd basically weaponized their own nostalgia. Commander K-Rax's latest transmission was a masterpiece of frustrated rage. Your colonies are defending themselves with preserved atomic-age rockets. We detected one installation using something called a punt gun mounted on a satellite. What even is a punt gun? Historical waterfowl hunting equipment, I explained helpfully. Very educational. Did you know it can launch a 2-pound projectile? Fascinating stuff. Really makes you appreciate Earth's wildlife conservation efforts. They're mounting them on orbital platforms. For better demonstration angles, obviously. The educational value is much higher with proper line of sight. The Vex Thor Empire's attempts to adapt were getting increasingly desperate. They tried installing kinetic barriers, but it turns out those work a lot better against small arms than they do against museum-piece artillery shells. They attempted to jam our targeting systems, only to discover that mechanical gun sights don't really care about electronic warfare. Sir Dave reported, still wearing his professor outfit, the Vex Thor fleet is attempting to adapt their shields to stop physical projectiles. How's that working out for them? Well, they successfully deflected a musket ball. Unfortunately, they were so busy celebrating that they missed the volley of Civil War-era cannonballs following it. The Museum of American History sends its regards. Rusty looked up from his manual long enough to watch a Vex Thor cruiser get taken out by what appeared to be a space-adapted version of a Roman ballista. You know what their problem is? They kept trying to make their technology more complicated. Meanwhile, we just kept figuring out new ways to throw rocks really fast. He had a point. The Vex Thor's response to every problem was to add more technology. Humans? We just dug through our archives for something that worked before and strapped rockets to it. The Galactic Council was frantically trying to close the museum loophole, but they were discovering another one of humanity's greatest weapons: bureaucratic malicious compliance. The regulations clearly state that historical artifacts can be maintained in working order for educational purposes. I explained to the Council for the dozenth time. And what better education than practical demonstrations? You turned a preserved Saturn V rocket into an orbital weapons platform, a Council member screeched. No, we turned it into an educational exhibit about the principles of rocketry. The fact that it can also launch kinetic penetrators is purely coincidental. Would you like to see our curriculum plan? It's very detailed. We have worksheets. The Vex Thor Empire's final attempt to counter our museums involved trying to build their own historical weapons. This went about as well as you'd expect for people whose idea of old technology meant last year's model. Did they just try to copy a battleship's main gun? Rusty asked, watching through the viewport. Yep, I replied, wincing as their version exploded spectacularly. Turns out there's more to it than just making a big tube that goes boom. Who knew? We knew, Dave chimed in. It's in the museum placards. Very informative. They really should have paid the admission fee and read them. That was the thing about humanities museums. They weren't just collections of old stuff, they were instruction manuals written in blood and victory, preserved for the day we'd need them again. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's following instructions in ways nobody expected. As another fleet of museum ships launched from Earth, their holds filled with carefully preserved implements of historical warfare, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best defense isn't having the newest technology, it's having really good documentation about the old stuff. The final battle between the Vex Thor Empire and humanity's impromptu museum fleet took place in orbit around Saturn. Seemed fitting. Really, what better place to demonstrate historical space technology than near the planet that inspired so much of it? Commander K-Rax's flagship hung in space before us, surrounded by the last of his fleet. His latest transmission had a slightly hysterical edge to it. This ends here. Humans. We've studied your historical records. We've adapted our shields. You cannot possibly have any more surprises. Funny thing about studying history, I replied, watching as museum ships took position around us. You really need to study all of it. Dave, would you like to introduce today's guest lecturer? Dave's hologram appeared, still in his professor outfit but now with added chalk dust. Today's lesson will be conducted by the Museum of Cold War Technologies, featuring a practical demonstration of why humans stopped testing nuclear weapons in space. Please ensure your radiation shields are up to date. K-Rax's cybernetic monocle twitched. You wouldn't dare. The regulations clearly state that historical demonstrations must be conducted safely and with appropriate containment measures. Phil's hologram interrupted, appearing on our bridge, which is why the Museum of Cold War Technologies has helpfully established a containment zone. The paperwork is already filed. You're helping them now, K-Rax demanded. All 14 of Phil's eyes blinked in sequence. The regulations must be followed. They followed them. My job is much easier when people follow regulations, even if they follow them in ways that make me want to retire to a nice quiet black hole. The museum ships moved into formation, each one deploying what their manifest listed as historical science packages. The Vex Thor fleet sensors, finally calibrated to detect physical projectiles, completely missed the old-style nuclear devices until they were already past the shields. Fascinating, Dave lectured as the first detonation created a new, temporary sun. Note how the electromagnetic pulse from these preserved educational materials interacts with modern shield systems. Would anyone like to hypothesize about the effects on quantum-linked computer networks? The Vex Thor fleet's advanced systems went dark, their ships drifting helplessly as centuries of preserved human ingenuity demonstrated exactly why some technologies got banned in the first place. K-Rax's final transmission was almost admirable in its frustration. How? How did you defeat the most advanced fleet in the galaxy with museum pieces? Simple, I replied. We never forgot how we got to the stars in the first place. Every step, every mistake, every victory, we kept it all. Not just in records, but in working order. Because humans know that sometimes the best solution isn't the newest one, it's the one you know works. The aftermath was everything you'd expect when bureaucrats have to deal with humans creatively following regulations. The Galactic Council spent months trying to close the museum loophole, only to discover that humans had already filed for historical preservation status for their existing museums under grandfather clauses. It's quite simple, I explained to the council during the peace negotiations. You can't ban our museums now, they're historically significant sites documenting the Great Museum War. It would be like destroying historical artifacts. There are regulations against that, you know. The look on their faces was worth every piece of paperwork. The Vex-Thor Empire signed the peace treaty in record time, especially after Earth announced plans for a new museum of recent historical conflicts. Funny how quick advanced civilizations can move when properly motivated by the threat of educational demonstrations. As for the right to bear arms, we got officially redesignated as a mobile historical reference facility, even got a plaque and everything. Phil personally approved it, though I'm pretty sure some of his tentacles were stress shedding by that point. You realize, Rusty said, watching Earth's museums slowly return to their normal positions, their holds still full of carefully preserved weapons, that we basically just proved why humans never throw anything away. Indeed, Dave agreed, finally ditching the professor outfit for his usual Hawaiian shirt. The educational value of today's events cannot be overstated. I've already prepared a curriculum. And that's how humanity carved out its niche in the galaxy, not as the most advanced civilization, but as the one that never forgot its history. Sure, we'll use your fancy energy weapons and quantum computers, but we'll keep our museums ready, just in case someone needs another lesson in why humans preserve their history. After all, those who don't study history are doomed to have it demonstrated to them, usually at high velocity,